Hello and welcome to the Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. Folks, I'd like to welcome you back. Those of you that are regular listeners, I have got quite a treat for you. And those of you that are new listeners, this will kind of open up a whole world for you, I think. My guest today is a gentleman by the name of Tim Shurr, and I've had the great fortune of getting to know Tim. I was on his podcast not too long ago, and the Mesmerizing podcast. And I use the word mesmerizing for a very specific reason here. Not only is it the title of his podcast, but Tim is one of the world's top hypnotists. And he's the founder of a method that's called One Belief Away. And we're going to be talking about belief systems today. This whole notion of leading an organization, you run into belief systems about what can be done, what should be done. I mean, all of these things. And as leaders, we run into belief systems about how we're supposed to be, that can either enhance our effectiveness or in many cases, actually limit what it is that we're trying to make happen. So I've asked him to join us today because he, like I said, is one of the top hypnotists in the world. But actually more than that, he is one of the most effective people in the world in dealing with belief systems. Yeah, both in terms of accelerating a one that's working well, but also finding ways to actually break through the limitations that many people hold on to. And I've got this thing that I kind of play with. The limiting beliefs can cause suffering, in our lives. But the one way to think about suffering is I call it stuffering. Stuffering. It's the stuff that gets in our way. So, if we're going to be stuffering, I want to know what that stuff is and how can I move that stuff out of the way so that I can actually be more effective. So with that preamble, I want to just welcome Tim to the show. Tim, it's great to have you here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, Blaine. And I love that stuffering because that's what it is, right? It's all the stuff that we have, all the reasons, the excuses, the evidence, from our past that seems to reinforce why we think the way that we do. And but often that is not exactly what's going on. No matter what challenge you have, you can almost always trace it back to a limiting belief that was probably formed when you were just a kid.
Yeah. I mean, the whole family of origin and dynamic and all of the stuff that we begin to pay attention to and the reinforcement that goes on with that. And, before I have a filtering mechanism that says this is likely to be true or this is likely not to be true, it all just drops in and becomes part of the gestalt. Yeah. The word stuffering, and I'm going to mention this for a moment here. I did some study with, not with, but of Milton Erickson's work. Just a phenomenal hypnotherapist. Was an exemplar that Bandler and Gridner worked with when they developed the neurolinguistic protocol. And Milton had this phrase that he loved to use, and he called it my brain just went dead. Sleight of tongue. Yeah, and stuffering. I mean, it's the way that you can interrupt a pattern, and this is where I'm going with this. Yeah. Belief systems run in patterned ways, and because they're patterned, they're almost out of sight and out of mind. I mean, literally out of mind. Yeah. So if you can find ways to interrupt the pattern, you've got an opportunity to interject something different that can actually change the trajectory of everything. Yeah. As a hypnotherapist and as a hypnotist, I want you to, if you would, enlighten us a little bit about, the methodology, because, and I'm talking about this because for a lot of people, hypnosis kind of is in the domain of stagecraftery. We'll see this up on a stage show in Las Vegas and go, isn't that cool? And look, they're barking like a dog. You're approaching this from a fundamentally different way, as did Milton. There's efficacy to this that is profound. So how have you actually gotten where you are, and what are some of the ways that you actually transcend that common thinking around what hypnotism is?
Well, that's an outstanding question, Blaine. And so most people, you're right, because of Hollywood movies and because of stage shows, the entertainment side of the business, which has kept hypnosis in front of people for a long time. That is one phase of it, one side of it. The other side is more of the clinical approach, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're able to help people to uncover those beliefs that they have, or break bad habits, or build more confidence, or lower stress in ways that are 100 times faster than, most traditional therapeutic approaches, talk therapy and trying to be a positive thinker and things like that. So I got into hypnosis because I was trying to get rid of my anxiety, and I had no idea I was going to become a hypnotist. And I always say hypnotist instead of hypnotherapist because I try to get the word therapy out of there. Just like when I went to, was going to grad school for psychology, I was being trained to be a psychotherapist, probably more psycho than therapist. And I didn't like either one of those words. So I just call myself, a clinical hypnotist. But really, I was just wanting to get rid of my anxiety. And so I went to school for psychology. And while I was working on my bachelor's degree, one of the classes, they would have guest speakers come in and share what they do to help people. And one happened to be a hypnotist. And he asked for a volunteer. And I said, yeah, I'll cluck like a chicken. I didn't know anything about it either. But within 5 minutes, I felt a feeling of calm, a sense of peace that washed over me that I had never felt before. And I'm like, what is this? And I was going to therapy and, working with professors on stuff. And it was part of the process. And I never felt anything like that. In fact, most of the time when I would talk about my problems, I would feel bad afterwards, or I would, you dig up stuff from the past and then you're left with it. Our hour's up, see you in a week, and then you're left with that. And so, but this was completely different. I felt a sense of ease, a feeling of peace. And then I felt really confident. He told me in that suggestible state of mind that I was in that I'd feel more confident that week. And I did. I felt more peaceful. I walked taller. I breathed deeper. I just felt better. And that was kind of unusual for me too. And so now, of course, about a week after that, it started to fade because I was good at doing anxiety, even though at the time, I didn't know that I was doing it. I felt it was happening to me. Right. And so, so I got really interested in that. When I got my bachelor's degree, I was working towards my master's, and I decided I'm going to go find a school, a hypnosis school, and learn more about this. And I got my certification. And that time that I was getting certified as a hypnotherapist, it was mind blowing. All the amazing breakthroughs that I was seeing happening instantly. And then, of course, I had my big breakthrough moment because I was a horrible nail biter. I mean, I would bleed and just keep biting, and my uncle would tie me down and put hot sauce on my fingers, and I would still chew them anyway. It was just, lots of trauma. And so, but I got this hypnosis session from a woman named Dr. Gazela Zuskowski, who was running the certification program. And, that was, I never bit my nails again. I have these nice, beautiful, strong, healthy fingernails now, and it's been 30 years. And that was really amazing for me. And so that's how I got into it. And I've had so many amazing experiences watching people transform in front of me, watching people achieve impossible goals, that now, I'm so passionate about getting the word out there that we can end this needless emotional suffering. And so I really appreciate all the work that you do, and how, you have this podcast, you share all the wisdom that you've collected, and that you're allowing me to share some of my story on your show. So thank you, Blaine.
And my absolute pleasure, Tim. I'm just intrigued with the work that you do. I mean, you personally have conducted over 15,000, if I've got the number right, over 15,000 individual coaching sessions with clients. And I was struck by something you said just a moment ago. I was good at doing anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And folks, I really want you to pay attention to that language, because, I mean, that is a description of the power of how belief systems actually kind of function. I'm good at doing, because it's a pattern. I'm good at doing the pattern.
Yeah.
And I don't notice it because it's just kind of how I run. Yeah. So getting people to achieve the impossible. I've got this notion that desire is absolutely fundamental to any kind of movement. If I'm going to be producing a result, I have to desire that result. But desire will always bump into a belief system of some sort. when I start the movement.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can either be facilitating the movement, or it can, in many cases, it actually constricts and inhibits the effective movement that could be be produced.
Much more often, that's the case.
Much more often. So if I'm a business leader, or if I'm a sales professional, how do you work with me to, I'm assuming, first of all, notice its presence, and then how do we go about mitigating its impact?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And that's exactly what I did, because I had a lot of business owners or executives or C-suite members that were coming to me because they wanted to stop nail biting, or they had a fear of flying, or they wanted to stop smoking, or I was helping their kids with something. And they had such amazing results. They're like, it started off with, you think you could hypnotize my sales team, to make more cold calls. And I was like, well, sure. I came from cornfields, so I didn't know really anything about corporate America, but I knew a lot about human behavior. Right. And so I went in there, and people are filled, especially sales guys and sales women are filled with limiting beliefs, fear of, getting rejected, and having a hard time with time management, and, or getting back to customers when something has gone wrong. They'll blow them off instead of calling them up because they don't want to get yelled at, and so they have all kinds of beliefs that sabotage them. And when I started upgrading them, it was amazing what started happening. And so you can teach a lot of strategy, and you can give people the best plan, and you can give them the whole playbook of here's how you do it. And then it's just a numbers game if you're talking about sales. But if they have those limiting beliefs that they picked up when they were 8 years old, that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'll be rejected, I want to chase people's approval, and I don't want to come across pushy. We have a whole bunch of limiting beliefs just around what salespeople are. The old, I don't want to be a used car salesperson, and they have that slick people skills, pushy, in your face kind of approach. And people do not like that. They don't want to be that way, most people. And they're afraid that customers are not going to respond to that either. And so they just procrastinate and get stuck. And, the best salespeople, as have a belief that I create friends everywhere I go. I'm building relationships, not a sale, but a relationship of sales, a lifetime value of a customer through creating these strong relationships. So instead of going in and teaching the same approaches that you could get from, I'm sure you probably know Tom Hopkins. I had Tommy on my show, and he's one of the best sales trainers there is, right? And yet, if you don't upgrade the beliefs, then it doesn't matter how great your strategies are. And so I would go in there and start upgrading those beliefs, and people were having dramatic experiences. And almost every time we would go back to some childhood experience where mom wasn't happy, or dad wasn't approving, or they were embarrassed in the third grade in front of the classroom. And it's not the traumatic experiences. We all have what I call big T and little t traumas. It's not the experiences we have. It's the beliefs that form in our mind without our permission, that are in our unconscious. Like you said, we're not aware. We're just doing what we do. We're not aware that these beliefs are even there driving our decision-making process. And they've been influencing us since we were little. And so now we're in a habit of however we show up, we have these habits. So when you go and you upgrade those beliefs, I've helped companies to double their employee satisfaction survey scores, because not just by teaching how to have more respectful communication, although that's wildly important and most people are not good at it, but why aren't they good at it? And it's often because they have beliefs that, well, you got to protect your own, people take advantage of you. You can't trust others. It's a dog eat dog world, right? When I'm working with leaders who are having a hard time working with their teams, before the pandemic, this was really strong. It's shifted a little bit now, but before the pandemic, the belief was, especially in middle management, I don't have enough time to get my own stuff done. How am I supposed to train somebody else? I can barely get my own stuff done, my own goals accomplished. How can I train someone else and help them to get theirs accomplished? This constant struggle between hitting your numbers and building your culture, and growing your people, and hitting your numbers would always win out, and people would constantly struggle. So when you upgrade that and you teach people to shift from competitive to cooperative, I could go on story after story, but it. So that's how I've been doing it in companies, and it's been amazing.
Well, boy, I've got notes all over the place here. I want to kind of come back to here. I'll just work backwards. Competition versus cooperation. One of the most profound beliefs that I run into in business is the belief that we need to compete in order to excel. Mm-hmm. And that belief system is so insidious and so toxic in my experience for a number of reasons. Once it's predicated on scarcity. There's only so much to go around. If I don't get mine, if you get yours, I don't get mine. I mean, all of that sort of stuff. So the idea of creativity, and cooperation comes with creativity, but a creative mindset versus a competitive mindset. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just kind of use that as our target for the conversation here for this next question, or the question that's embedded here. You're referencing, and you used the word about 5 different times here, upgrading the belief system. Not changing, but upgrading. It's kind of like upgrading the OS, the operating system. The therapeutic approach is to change the belief, to go back in and just kind of spend 6 months just kind of exploring and all kinds of stuff where the whole epistemology of where did the belief come from. Mm-hmm. Upgrading is different. I've got a hunch in the way that you work with it, because my knowing of what the work is that you do is you get results quickly.
Yes.
It's not an arduous, okay, let's spend 14 days on the couch.
No, give me an hour. Give me 30 minutes.
Give me an hour. So the upgrading of a belief system, let's just take the belief system of competition is the only way to get ahead. Mm-mm. That belief system, how would you upgrade that belief system to something more generative? Okay. As an example, if I can just go generic with it.
Well, that's great. So I love the fact that you caught that distinction between changing, because personality doesn't really change that much. But, like with my phone, it upgrades all the time. It updates all the time, right? In fact, a lot of times I can't even use my phone unless they allow it to update, because it runs better and it protects from viruses and mental malware. Well, computer malware, but we get mental malware, right? And so it upgrades, but the phone is still the same. Right? This just allows it to run more effectively. And that's why I talk about upgrading instead of changing. Collaborative versus competitive. So a lot of times companies, it's okay if you're competing against your competition, right? You're looking at what they're doing, you're figuring out where their gaps are and how you can make that your competitive advantage. Things like that can be okay. Sometimes competition can be healthy and it can be really good. But what I find is it's competition within the company. Departments pointing fingers at each other, big sales floors turning into mini kingdoms, depending on the sales manager that they have, competing with each other, individuals competing with each other. And when you're competing with each other, you're not supporting and lifting each other up. One goes up and one goes down. And you and I both know that that's not a good way to lift an entire organization, right? And so, but I'll tell you a very specific story. So there was a VP of marketing. He was in this company, and mid-level, mid-sized company, and very competitive. It's how he was raised. He was in sports, very competitive, everything he did, and really funny sense of humor, but, grew up in the 70s where everybody is sarcastic. Everybody's ripping on everybody else, right? So much sarcasm. And so he would have healthy sarcasm with all his employees and everybody else, and they would try to get at each other. Right. And I remember walking in there to do a training one time, and he had one of these guys. He had got a whole cardboard cutout of him wearing this, and it looked like he was wearing a dress or something, and he put it in the main lobby just as trying to be funny. That, I got you, with this cardboard cutout. And the guy was, laughing about it, but I could tell it hurt his feelings because he really looked up to this VP, and so many people in power positions think that the way they got successful was by being tough as nails and keeping people at an arm's length and being the money guy and focused. I've had people say that to me. That's how I made my millions, and I'm like, yeah, but it's not taking you where you want to go. And you have all those fancy trophies in your case, but your people hate your culture, right? Is that what you want your legacy to be? And so, and he didn't care for that. But again, those pattern interrupts you were talking about earlier. So what I did was I got into his mind and shifted beliefs and helped him to go from what I used a metaphor from father to grandfather. And that made him tear up because fathers are still trying to prove themselves. And I've met fathers who said, I'll never let my kid beat me in a basketball game. You know, I'm going to show them. And which I always think, what are you trying to prove? But grandfathers often don't do that anymore. They're more laid back, you know, and you're looking at how your dad treats your kid and you're like, who's that guy? He didn't treat me that way. You know, he's giving him a pat on the back and I would have been having to run laps or something. And so grandfathers are more mellow because they're older and have a little bit more wisdom, hopefully. And so I helped him to understand that we need to be collaborative and your role isn't to assert your dominance. You're already awesome. People already know that you're a star. You need to focus on helping people feel like they're a star now.
Yeah.
And that completely changed his approach. He had to get rid of a couple of people on his team, unfortunately, because they were so in that energy with him and they couldn't shift it. And so some people had to move out, but it opened the door for new people to come in. Skip ahead a couple of years. Not only did it transform the whole company because he was such an influence and he became the grandfatherly, supportive, lift you up person, which was a big deal for this company. But it also, there was a spot that opened up to become the president of that company years later. I was with him for 6 years. And when I finally left, he was the president. You know, he got that spot.
Story.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
When we come back, we're going to take a real quick break here. I want to continue with the thread that story actually exposes. You've got a program that I want to be sure that we actually talk about here, the power of your unconscious mind, because this is essentially what you're addressing here. We'll take the break here. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole until we come back from the break. So, folks, I am talking with Tim Shurr, and you're listening to this conversation, which I hope you're finding to be very useful. I certainly am. I'm learning some amazing things here right now, and this is one of the things that I want to come back to. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up this thread. Specifically, I want to look at father, grandfather. There's a really interesting notion here that I want to play with. So we'll be right back. Stay tuned. I want to thank you for listening. I want to also invite you right now to go to blainebartlett.com. And on that site, which is my personal website, you'll see services up on the top menu. I'd like you to click on Leadership Mastermind. Now, why I want you to do that is we have structured a mastermind program that is very unusual and it is very powerful. And by going onto that site and clicking that link, you'll be taken to a landing page that is an invitation to join this mastermind. It's a 52-week-long exploration of what it takes to be a highly effective leader in today's fast-changing environment. You won't regret it. And if you've been liking what you've been listening to on these Soul of Business podcasts, how does one become a leader that can keep connection to the soul of business? That's what we look at. That's what we're about in this mastermind program. So again, go to blainebartlett.com and click on the services link. And there you'll find the link to the Leadership Mastermind program. Look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for listening to this little commercial. And now back to our show. Hello and welcome back. Before we took a break, Tim was talking about this client that he had that actually had a fundamentally transformative experience through the simple use of a shift in language. What energy will follow attention. And what I'm focusing on is basically what I end up building my reality around. Would be one way to think about this. I've got this idea that I'm playing with. I run a program called the 7 Hidden Laws of Leadership, and one of the hidden laws is the law of vibrational fit. And everything runs on frequency. I mean, the entire universe is a frequency machine, and everything shows up, the table that you're sitting at, the desk that I'm at, the books behind me are all vibrating. They look static, but they're actually vibrating. There's frequency too. Match the frequency, and that ends up showing up in my reality. Now, words have frequency as well. And this is where I'm going with this. The idea of using the word father in the way that you described it, proving, controlling, guiding. I mean, some of the things that are inherent in the language that is embedded, the meaning that's embedded in the word father, which is vibrationally going to produce very specific sorts of results. Grandfather. I mean, when we're upgrading a belief system, and this is a great example of that upgrade process. Upgrade the thinking from I'm a father, which was probably subliminal, out of sight, out of mind. I wasn't aware of it, but now I start thinking consciously of, as a grandfather, how would I approach this? The idea of using that kind of a process, it's so simple and it's so elegant, minimal unintended consequences as an offshoot of that, but consequences that are profoundly real down the road. He's now the president of the company. You've got a program, Tim, that's called the Power of Your Unconscious Mind. And by the way, folks, just so you know here, Tim's approach is so effective. I mean, he's been featured on ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News. He's got a couple of TED programs, TED Talks that he's done here. And as well as a number of different books that we'll talk about near the end of the session here. But I specifically want to do a little bit of a dive into the power of your unconscious mind. Can you talk a little bit for the listeners about if they were to take advantage of this, because it's a program that you're making available, what would they expect to see and how is it actually structured?
Well, that's an awesome question. So I made the Power of Your Unconscious Mind program because, 27 years of doing hypnosis, I've got some pretty amazing stories. I remember there was a local weatherman, meteorologist on a TV show here in Indianapolis where I'm at. And they were doing a segment. He was doing the weather and there was another segment. And the main anchorman, Ray, was sitting just, 100 feet away, and they were going to do it on spiders and animals. And so he actually had a tarantula. Ray had a tarantula on his arm. Now, Jim, the weatherman, was way on the other side of the studio, but he took one look at that spider and ran out of the studio during the live broadcast. I mean, he had a spider phobia, arachnophobia, right? And everybody was teasing him, on the radio, all the jocks and everybody. And so, and I heard him on an interview. I didn't think much of it, but I heard him on an interview, Jim, being interviewed. And he said, well, the only thing about it, I don't like spiders, but my dad heard about it. And I feel kind of embarrassed because my dad, heard that I ran out because of a spider, and that, I don't know if it pushed something inside of me because I don't like to, feel that needless emotional suffering. So I called up the studio and said, I could help him become the hero and turn that story around, and give me an hour with him. And I didn't hear anything back. And then a couple of weeks later, I get a call from a producer of the show. And she said, hey, you think you could help him just stay in the room? And I'm like, if you give me, enough time, I could probably get that spider on his arm, just like Ray did. And she almost hung up on me. Later, she said, I almost hung up on you because I thought you were so, ridiculous. She's like, well, that's okay. If you can just get him in the room. Long story short, I only had 10 minutes with him because they kept doing these previews, 10 minutes with him. And in that 10 minutes, I had that tarantula on his arm. That is the power of your mind. So I tell stories about people that have lost 150 pounds, and completely changed their body, all these impossible goals, and yet people accomplish them. So whatever impossible goal you feel like you might have right now with your health, your money, your relationships, your self-confidence, the trauma that you've had in the past, whether you have a situation at work where the turnover is just killing you, or the fear of masks and vaccines and, or whatever else is going on, we can shift that. It's pretty amazing. So this program is designed to share those stories and then give you some mind hacks, right? Some shortcuts for how to use the power of your mind to create your life by design. And everybody that is subscribed to Blaine's podcast, you got to be subscribed. If you are, we'll give you a free copy of that.
Tim, thank you. God, that's great. That's wonderful. And greatly appreciated. As a matter of fact, I'm going to sign up.
You'll like
Count me
it.
in. What's an example? You mentioned a hack, and I mean, yeah, I know a lot of folks. John Assaraf, Dave Asprey, Jack Canfield. I mean, these are all friends of mine, and they all, we all do hacks of some sort.
Yes.
When you're talking about a mind hack in this context, what are you actually talking about?
So I created this other program called the Cure for Self-Sabotage. And I found that there were 10 core self-sabotages that people are doing all the time that they don't realize they're doing. And I see it consistently. And if you flip them around, it's 10 of the most powerful ways to use the power of your mind to create your life by design. And so one of them, for example, is by focusing on what you want instead of what you're trying to get away from. Because as you have said before, where your attention goes, energy flows, right? And so if you're focused on what you don't want and what you're trying to get away from, you end up moving towards it or attracting more of it to you. So if you have a kid and you say, don't throw that toy, what do? They throw the toy because their brain doesn't hear don't, right? If I want to lose weight, or I want to stop procrastinating, or I want to get out of debt, then you end up procrastinating more and being in debt. And people don't get that. And it's because that's what you're focused on. So I had a client come to me one time and she said, I want to stop procrastinating. And I said, okay, great. What do you want? She said, well, I want to stop putting things off. Outstanding. Well, what do you want to have happen as a result? Well, I want to stop being so unorganized. And I'm like, all your brain is hearing is procrastinate, put things off, and unorganized. And that's why you keep doing that, because that's all you're feeding your mind. What you really want is to feel inspired, motivated, productive, have things organized and in a state of flow so that you associate pleasure to taking action and comfort to going after your goal. Right now, all your brain hears is pain, pain, pain. And our brain procrastinates as a self-protective mechanism. We procrastinate because we've associated pain to the goal, right? And that's why when in sales, people won't make calls because they're afraid they're going to get rejected or yelled at. And so they push away. So that's a simple of shifting towards what you want instead of what you're away from.
Well, and again, that is so elegant. It's anybody can do it. Yeah. My exercise regime. I want to exercise so that I'm healthy. Okay, well, that's all well and good. But there's a for the sake of what that is deeper than that. And I mean, I love to teach. I mean, a very good friend of mine just passed, Bob Proctor. Bob was one of my best friends, and he was 87. And in my mind, I see myself teaching, when I'm 87, when I'm 90. But I know also that I have to be vibrantly healthy in order to do that. Yes. So I'm associating the pleasure I get out of teaching with the exercise, which sometimes is an aggravation. It truly is. But the pleasure associated, that association, behavior, and I'm just kind of checking this out here. This is an assumption. Behavior is always organized, in my experience, around the meaning that I've made up around the stimulus. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah. So, and the meaning made up is another word for the belief.
Yeah. So upgrade the meaning, and all of a sudden I've got a whole different reality that I get to play with.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. It opens the doors of possibility for you. And so not only did you start to associate more pleasure to fitness, you gave it a purpose, and it became a mission for you. It becomes a set of values for you. If exercise, or what I call it fitness, because people have all these negative connotations to exercise, no pain, no gain, but fitness can be fun. We're going to get our fitness on, right? So when you have that fitness and it's in alignment with your values, it's in alignment with your purpose, keeping your mind and body in the best shape possible so that you can continue to be a vessel for good and you can continue to bring value to the world. That lights you up. You'll do it even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's not convenient. You'll do it anyway because you have a set of standards now that belongs to. And so you'll do it because it matters. And that's very different from someone who just wants, I got to lose this weight because I can't fit in my pants.
Yeah, because fitting in my pants is uncomfortable right now. So it's associated with discomfort. Yeah.
It's just pain. Yeah.
Just pain. Tim, yeah, one last thing here. We're going to begin to wrap this up. Unfortunately, I mean, I could go on with this conversation for a very long time. You use the word possibility here, and I'm keying on that because yeah, almost all of my work is in the domain of leadership development, leadership effectiveness, those sorts of things. Leaders, in my experience, highly effective leaders are leaders that can bring possibility into visibility so that it now can be seen as something that's probable. And if I can make the possible visible, it becomes probable. If it's probable, it has a very high likelihood of becoming real.
Yeah.
So that migration between, from possibility to probability, and this is just kind of what I'm checking out. That is my sense of where you actually are excellent. And then the move from probability to reality is just kind of a natural migration, but the heavy lift is bringing that possibility into a probability. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because when I started out my career, there were so many tools and techniques, and there still are these new techniques. Everybody's an internet guru now, and you're going to change your life, in 10 minutes doing this, and you don't have to do anything kind of approach. And so I've always been a little skeptical of that, as many people are. And so I've had this prove it mentality, right? And so if we are talking about making something that's a probability visible, right, which means show me and let's see if this actually makes things happen. When I got into working with companies, they started asking me questions like, well, what are your KPIs? I had no idea what that was. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. And so, but what they were looking for is, how do we measure this, right? How do we prove that this is worth the investment that we're going to put into it? And of course, now we have that. But, then I'm like, well, let me show you, right? Because you don't have to wait for months. You're going to see it at the end of this meeting. You're going to see it in people's attitude and how they talk to one another and how they high five each other down the hallway and how they are more supportive and patient when they're responding to emails, and more respectful or more clear with their expectations and assumptions or whatever it is that we were working on. And you're able to see it immediately, and then it's sustainable. I'm all about sustainability, right? So we go from probability. I had to write it down. It was so beautiful how you said it, from probability to visibility to sustainability. Right. And so
probability. Yeah. The way we go. It's a migration. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. It is a path, and it's a proven path, and it's a replicable, a duplicatable path. You can, you can replicate it. Right. And so, yeah, that's exciting. And I am good at that because I've been practicing it for 27 years. And so I've been in this game of psychology for 32 of them. I had a lot more hair when I started, Blaine.
Well, we're going to end on, I'm good at doing that. We began with, I'm good at doing anxiety. We're ending on, I'm good at doing excellence. So awesome. You are an exemplar of what excellence is about. Where can people find out more about both you and also the program?
So it'll be in the show notes, I'm sure. But if you go to Indie Hypnosis, INDY hypnosis.com, if you're interested in the hypnosis, timshurr.com, if you're interested in what I do with companies. And then, of course, powermindsetprogram.com, powermindsetprogram.com, if you're interested in getting your free copy of The Power of Your Unconscious Mind.
Beautiful. And you take advantage of Tim's offer on that, folks. It's going to require that you subscribe if you haven't already to the podcast, but that's a no-brainer. All you have to do is click yes. Yes. Been listening to my good friend, Tim Shurr. Just an absolute joy to have you on the show and actually have another conversation with you that has been as rich as the previous ones. I've loved this. Thank you very much.
It is such a pleasure. Yeah, you are the definition of mesmerizing on my show, and it's such a privilege to be on yours. So thank you very much, Blaine, for all you do.
Folks, you've been listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. You can find out more about what I'm up to at blainebartlett.com. All kinds of resources there. Feel free to take advantage. It's all yours for the taking and for your use. And until next time, have a great rest of your day, and find yourself ways to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. You'll have a much richer life. Take care.